The day my own father took everything from me, that was the day I stopped believing in family. I remember the exact moment, the weight of the betrayal crushing my chest as I stared at the empty bank account on my phone screen. Years of savings gone in an instant, stolen by the one person who was supposed to protect me. They thought I would crumble. They thought they had broken Amanda beyond repair. They were wrong. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you considered family, subscribe now to find out how Amanda gets even. My sister Emily had always been the golden child. Beautiful, charismatic, and perpetually irresponsible, she floated through life leaving a trail of financial wreckage in her wake. This time, it was a $68,000 debt, a combination of bad business decisions and even worse luck, or so she claimed. She begged my parents for help, tears streaming down her face as she described the dire consequences if she couldn't pay it back. I knew my parents would cave. They always did. But this was different. This was an astronomical amount, far exceeding their comfortable retirement savings. I had worked tirelessly since graduating college, sacrificing vacations and new clothes, diligently building a secure financial future for myself. I knew what it was like to struggle, to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Emily had never known that life. My parents, especially my father, had always subtly favored Emily. I was the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who didn't need help. Emily, on the other hand, was a free spirit who needed constant rescuing. I loved my sister, but I couldn't deny the resentment that simmered beneath the surface. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle, the unfairness of it all. So when my father approached me, his eyes pleading, his voice laced with desperation, I knew what was coming. He asked me to help Emily, to contribute a significant portion of my savings to bail her out. I explained that I had my own financial goals, my own dreams. I told him I couldn't afford to give away that much money, that it wouldn't be fair to me. I offered to help in other ways, finding Emily a financial advisor, helping her create a budget, even lending her a smaller sum, but I refused to empty my account. My father seemed disappointed, but he didn't push further, at least not then. He simply said he understood, that he respected my decision. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. I wanted to believe that he would finally understand that I wasn't a bottomless pit of resources to be exploited whenever Emily made a mistake. I should have known better. The next morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone. My bank account balance was zero. Panic surged through me as I frantically logged into my account, my hands trembling. There it was, staring back at me in cold, hard numbers. A complete and utter drain. Every single penny. Gone. I immediately called the bank, my voice shaking with disbelief. They confirmed that the transfer had been authorized by my father, who had been a co-signer on the account since I was a minor. He had used his authority to empty my account and give the money to Emily. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world tilted on its axis. Disbelief warred with a white-hot rage that threatened to consume me. I drove to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I needed an explanation. I needed to understand how my own father could do this to me. When I arrived, Emily was there, lounging on the sofa, a smug look on her face that she quickly tried to hide. My father met me at the door, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. He didn't deny it. He admitted to taking the money, saying he had no other choice, that Emily was his daughter too, and he couldn't let her lose everything. The words were like knives twisting in my gut. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal, the blatant disregard for my feelings, my dreams, my future. He had always seen me as the strong one, the one who could handle anything. But I wasn't made of stone. I had worked for that money. I had sacrificed for that money. And he had simply taken it, without a second thought, to appease his favorite child. I tried to reason with him, to explain the impact this would have on my life. I told him about my plans to buy a house, to invest in my future, to finally achieve some financial security. He just shrugged, saying I would figure it out, that he always did. Emily chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy, saying she would pay me back someday. But I knew she wouldn't. She never did. That was the breaking point. That was the moment I realized that my relationship with my family would never be the same. The foundation of trust had been shattered, leaving behind a gaping hole filled with resentment and anger. I left their house that day feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The weight of the injustice pressed down on me, stealing my breath, making it hard to see anything beyond the crimson haze of my fury.
The following weeks were a blur of panic and desperation. I tried everything to salvage my situation. I called the bank, begging them to reverse the transaction, but they were unyielding. My father had authorized the transfer, and there was nothing they could do. I consulted with a lawyer, hoping to find some legal recourse, but he told me it would be a long, expensive battle with no guarantee of success. Because my father was a co-signer on the account, he had the legal right to withdraw the funds. The law, it seemed, was on their side. Sleepless nights became the norm. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in my head, searching for some way to undo what had happened. The stress began to take a toll on my health. I lost weight, my hair started to thin, and I developed a persistent headache that throbbed behind my eyes. My work suffered, and I struggled to focus on even the simplest tasks. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of my financial burden. The shame was almost as crushing as the financial loss. I was embarrassed to tell my friends what had happened, afraid of their judgment, their pity. I isolated myself, withdrawing from social activities, preferring to spend my evenings alone in my apartment, nursing my anger and plotting my next move. I considered confronting Emily again, demanding that she take responsibility for her actions, but I knew it would be futile. She was incapable of feeling remorse, of understanding the consequences of her selfishness. My father, blinded by his love for her, would continue to enable her behavior, protecting her from the consequences of her actions. I started to resent them both, my sister and my father, the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Instead, they had betrayed me in the worst possible way, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my shattered financial life. I had to find a way to reclaim my power, to restore my sense of self-worth. And that's when the seed of revenge began to sprout in my mind. The abyss. That's the only way I can describe those weeks. Everything was gray, muffled, like I was moving through water. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage. The silence amplified the echoes of their betrayal, the casual cruelty with which they had dismantled my life. I lost my job, showing up late, unable to focus, a shell of my former self. It was inevitable. The shame was a constant companion, whispering insidious doubts in my ear. You're worthless. You're weak. You deserved it. I started having dark thoughts. The world seemed bleak, devoid of hope. What was the point of working hard, of saving, of planning for the future, when it could all be taken away in an instant? The temptation to just give up, to let the darkness consume me, was overwhelming. One night, I found myself standing on the edge of the bridge, the cold wind whipping around me. The city lights blurred below, shimmering like fallen stars in the inky blackness of the water. It would be so easy. A release from the pain, the shame, the crushing weight of my despair. I closed my eyes, picturing my father's face, his eyes filled with that familiar disappointment. And then I saw Emily's smug smile, the one she had tried to hide that day at my parents' house. A spark of defiance flickered within me. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted to believe that they had won. And that's when I knew I couldn't give them the satisfaction. Letting them win was the same as ending it all. I stepped back from the edge, my heart pounding in my chest. The cold air filled my lungs, and a newfound clarity washed over me. I was not going to let them destroy me. I was not going to let them steal my future. I would not be a victim. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface now surged to the forefront, a white-hot inferno that burned away the despair. It was no longer just about the money. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my power. It was about making them pay for what they had done. I walked away from the bridge that night with a newfound sense of purpose. The darkness hadn't disappeared entirely, but it was now tempered with a steely resolve. I spent the next few days researching, planning, meticulously gathering information. The internet became my weapon, my tool for uncovering their secrets, their vulnerabilities.
I needed to understand their world, their weaknesses, the things they valued most. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every interaction, every detail that could potentially be used against them. I became a ghost, observing their lives from the shadows, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew that revenge wouldn't bring back my money, wouldn't erase the pain of their betrayal, but it would give me something else, a sense of closure, a feeling that I had fought back, that I had refused to be defeated. I started small, focusing on Emily. She was always the weakest link, the most impulsive, the most prone to making mistakes. It didn't take long to uncover a mountain of evidence: unpaid bills, shady business dealings, a string of broken promises and betrayed friends. I learned about her gambling addiction, the secret debts she had been hiding from my parents. I discovered that the $68,000 she had begged for wasn't just for business debts, it was to cover her losses at the casino. My sister thought she was untouchable. I decided it was time to show her she wasn't. I carefully curated the information, selecting the most damaging pieces, the ones that would inflict the most pain. I wanted to expose her lies, to reveal her true nature to the world. My plan was simple: to systematically dismantle her life, piece by piece, until she was left with nothing. And then I would turn my attention to my father.
He was a more formidable opponent, but I was confident that I could find his weakness, the chink in his armor. He thought he was protecting Emily, but he was actually enabling her destructive behavior. He would soon learn the consequences of his actions. Inside, I found copies of my bank statements, the transfer authorization form, and a handwritten note from my father outlining his plan to take my money and give it to Emily. But there was something else, something even more damning. A letter from Emily, thanking my father for his help and promising to pay him back as soon as she got back on her feet. The letter was dated several months before my father had actually taken my money, proving that the entire scheme had been pre-planned. I quickly took photos of everything with my phone, making sure to capture every detail. Then, I carefully replaced the folder, making it look like nothing had been disturbed. As I slipped out of the house, I felt a surge of triumph. I had the proof I needed to expose their lies and bring them to justice. The waiting was the hardest part. I had all the pieces of the puzzle, but I needed to assemble them in the right way, at the right time. I continued to play the role of the dutiful daughter, attending family events and feigning interest in their lives. But beneath the surface, I was seething with anger, my every interaction fueled by the burning desire for revenge. There were moments when I almost lost control, when I wanted to scream at them, to confront them with their betrayal. But I knew that would be a mistake. I had to be patient, to wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. As the days turned into weeks, the anticipation grew unbearable. I rehearsed my plan in my head, visualizing every detail, anticipating every possible outcome. I knew that once I set my plan in motion, there would be no turning back. It was a high-stakes game, and I was determined to win. I had to be ready to face the consequences, whatever they may be. I spent hours researching the best way to reveal the truth, considering everything from posting it anonymously online to confronting them publicly at a family gathering. Each option had its pros and cons, its risks and rewards. Ultimately, I decided on a strategy that would maximize the impact and minimize the potential for blowback. I would gather all the evidence, compile it into a comprehensive report, and then present it to the authorities. I would let the legal system take its course, ensuring that they would be held accountable for their actions. It was a risky strategy, but I believed it was the only way to achieve true justice. I knew my family thought I was some pushover. They severely underestimated me. They were about to learn a very harsh lesson.
The pieces were falling in place faster than I could have imagined. Emily's weakness wasn't just her gambling addiction. It was her insatiable need for validation, her desperate craving to appear successful and wealthy. She constantly flaunted her supposed achievements on social media, posting pictures of expensive clothes, fancy cars, and exotic vacations. What most people didn't realize was that nearly all of it was fake. The clothes were often returned after a single wear, the cars were rentals, and the vacations were heavily subsidized by my parents. She had created a carefully curated facade, a house of cards built on lies and deceit. I decided to use her vanity against her, to lure her into a trap she couldn't escape. I created a fake social media account, posing as a wealthy investor from out of state. I sent her a direct message, praising her entrepreneurial spirit and expressing interest in her business ventures. I complimented her on her impeccable taste and her natural talent for marketing. She took the bait immediately. Within minutes, she had responded, gushing with gratitude and eagerly offering to schedule a meeting. I played hard to get, feigning a busy schedule and a reluctance to invest in anything too risky. This only made her more determined. She bombarded me with messages, emails, and even phone calls, desperately trying to convince me that her business was a gold mine. I finally agreed to meet her for lunch at a high-end restaurant in the city, knowing that she would pull out all the stops to impress me. The stage was set. I arrived at the restaurant early, securing a discreet table in a quiet corner. I wanted to observe her arrival, to gauge her level of desperation. I watched as she strutted through the entrance, dressed in a designer outfit that screamed expensive, her face plastered with a fake smile. She scanned the room, her eyes darting from table to table, searching for her potential benefactor. When she spotted me, her face lit up and she hurried over, extending her hand with an overly enthusiastic greeting. The performance had begun. Over lunch, she regaled me with tales of her supposed business triumphs, exaggerating her successes and downplaying her failures. She spoke of million-dollar deals, celebrity endorsements, and plans for global expansion, all of which I knew were complete fabrications. I nodded politely, feigning interest, while secretly recording the entire conversation on my phone. I baited her with questions about her financial projections, her marketing strategies, and her customer base, carefully leading her down a path of self-incrimination. She eagerly divulged sensitive information, revealing her secret debts, her fraudulent activities, and her desperate need for cash. With each passing minute, the trap was closing tighter. As the lunch drew to a close, I subtly steered the conversation towards the $68,000 she had taken from me.
I asked her how she had used the money, what kind of return she had generated. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Then she launched into a convoluted story about a failed investment, a series of unfortunate circumstances, and a temporary setback. But I could see the lies flickering in her eyes, the sweat beading on her forehead. I pressed her further, demanding to know exactly where the money had gone. She stammered and stuttered, offering a string of increasingly implausible excuses. Finally, she broke down, confessing that she had used the money to cover her gambling debts. The mask had slipped. The facade had crumbled. I had her exactly where I wanted her. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Emily," I said softly, "I know everything." Her eyes widened in panic. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. I pulled out my phone, displaying the photos I had taken of the documents in my father's filing cabinet. "I know about the letter," I said, "the one where you thanked my father for helping you steal my money. I know about your gambling addiction, your secret debts, your fraudulent business dealings." Her face drained of all color. She looked like she was about to faint. "No," she whispered, "that's not true. You're lying." "Am I?" I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I have proof, Emily. I have everything I need to expose you to the world." I watched as the realization dawned on her, as she understood the full extent of her predicament. She was trapped. There was no escape. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling, "don't do this to me. You're my sister." "And you're a liar and a thief," I retorted, "who betrayed me in the worst possible way." I stood up from the table, preparing to leave. "I'm giving you a choice, Emily," I said. "You can either confess everything to our parents and the authorities, or I will." I paused, letting my words sink in. "The choice is yours." I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting alone at the table, her life crumbling around her. As I stepped out onto the street, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The plan was in motion. The final blow was about to be delivered. I could almost taste the revenge. But there was still my father to deal with, and I knew that he wouldn't go down without a fight. What I didn't know was just how far he was willing to go to protect his favorite child. The phone rang, and the screen flashed. "Dad." I took a breath. This was it. "Hello?" I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. His voice was strained, tight. "We need to talk." And at that moment, I knew. The game had truly begun. My father's voice on the phone was a low rumble, laced with a barely suppressed fury. "We need to talk," he'd said, and I knew the storm was about to break. I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our houses, the following morning. I needed to be prepared. I spent the rest of the day finalizing my report, gathering all the evidence, the photos of the documents, the recordings of Emily's confession, the bank statements, everything. I made multiple copies, knowing that I would need to protect myself. I also contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation and seeking legal advice. He assured me that I had a strong case, but warned me that my father would likely fight back with everything he had. I knew he would. He was a powerful man, used to getting his way, and he wouldn't let me expose his wrongdoing without a struggle. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities and anxieties. I kept replaying the events of the past few months in my head, wondering if I had made the right decisions, if I could have done anything differently. But I knew that I had done everything I could to protect myself and to seek justice. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, choosing a table near the back, away from the windows. I wanted to be able to see who was coming and going, to have a clear view of the exits. My father arrived a few minutes later, his face grim, his eyes dark. He sat down across from me without a word, his presence filling the small space with tension. "What is this all about?" he asked, his voice tight. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I know what you did," I said. "I know about the money you took from me, and I know about your scheme with Emily." His face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Don't lie to me," I retorted. "I have proof. I have copies of the documents from your filing cabinet, the letter from Emily, everything. I slid a copy of my report across the table towards him. He stared at it for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he picked it up, his hands trembling slightly, and began to read. As he turned the pages, his face paled and his jaw tightened. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that it's true." He slammed the report down on the table, his face crimson. "You wouldn't dare," he said. "You wouldn't do this to your own family." "I have no choice," I replied. "You left me no choice. You betrayed me, and you need to be held accountable." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "Think about what you're doing," he said. "This will destroy our family. It will ruin everything." "You should have thought about that before you stole my money," I retorted. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. "I'm not going to let you do this," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "I'm going to stop you." "How?" I asked. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. I watched him go, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. The confrontation was over, but the battle was just beginning. I knew that he wouldn't give up easily. He would fight to protect himself and his daughter, even if it meant destroying everything in his path. I braced myself for the storm that was about to come. The following days were a blur of activity. I filed my report with the authorities, providing them with all the evidence I had gathered. They assured me that they would investigate the matter thoroughly and take appropriate action. I also contacted my parents' friends and colleagues, informing them of what had happened. Many of them were shocked and dismayed, offering their support and condolences. Others were skeptical, refusing to believe that my father was capable of such behavior. But I knew that the truth would eventually come out. The news broke a few days later, sending shockwaves through our community. The local newspaper published a front-page article about the investigation, detailing the allegations against my father and Emily. The story quickly went viral, spreading across social media and cable news. The reaction was swift and severe. My father was immediately suspended from his job, his reputation in tatters. Emily's business ventures collapsed, her clients abandoning her in droves. They became pariahs, shunned by their friends and neighbors. The family home was besieged by reporters, their every move scrutinized and publicized. The shame and humiliation were unbearable. I watched it all unfold from a distance, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and regret. I had achieved my goal. I had exposed their lies and brought them to justice. But the cost was immense. Our family was shattered, our relationships irrevocably damaged. I wondered if it had all been worth it. Emily tried to contact me several times, begging me to drop the charges, to forgive her for what she had done, but I refused to speak to her. I couldn't forgive her betrayal. She had hurt me too deeply. My father also reached out, his voice filled with remorse and desperation. He pleaded with me to reconsider, to give him another chance. But I couldn't trust him. He had proven himself to be a liar and a manipulator. I couldn't risk being hurt again. In the end, Emily was charged with fraud and embezzlement, facing a lengthy prison sentence. My father was also charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice, his career and reputation destroyed. They both pleaded guilty, hoping to mitigate their sentences. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge pronounce their fate, I felt a sense of closure. Justice had been served. They had been held accountable for their actions. They lost everything. I just smiled. The years that followed were difficult. Our family remained fractured, the wounds slow to heal. My mother struggled to cope with the shame and embarrassment, withdrawing from society and becoming increasingly isolated. I tried to support her as best I could, but the damage had been done. Our relationship would never be the same. As for me, I moved on with my life, focusing on my career and my own well-being. I learned to trust my instincts and to protect myself from those who would try to take advantage of me. I also learned the importance of forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. I realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only poison my own soul. I had to let go of the past in order to move forward. Looking back on it all now, I can honestly say that I have no regrets. I did what I had to do to protect myself and to seek justice. It was a painful and difficult process, but it was necessary. Revenge isn't sweet. it's necessary. It's about reclaiming your power, about standing up for yourself, about refusing to be a victim. It's about sending a message that you will not be silenced, that you will not be ignored, that you will not be taken advantage of. And sometimes that's the only way to be heard. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.